Everyone said Emma Darwin had the perfect life. They were right, if perfection meant silence, pressure, and failure disguised as privilege. At 17, Emma lived in a mansion so large her voice came back to her in echoes. Chandeliers glittered above polished marble, and the scent of imported roses floated through rooms no one used. From the outside, it looked like paradise. Inside, it felt like punishment. Every morning began the same way. A driver waiting by the black sedan, a schedule written by her father's assistant, and another disappointed tutor sitting in the study, ready to test her on material she had already failed. By the third hour, the silence between questions grew unbearable. By the fourth, another tutor resigned, politely at first, then desperately. Her father called it discipline. Emma called it noise. Welcome back to Whisper Realm, where we dish out amazing stories that resonate with you. If you find this story interesting already, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from in the comment section, and let's make the video to go viral. Now let's begin. Richardson Darwin, a man whose signature could shift entire markets, demanded precision from everything he owned, including his daughter. He didn't raise her, he managed her. Results, not excuses. He would say as though he were talking to a subordinate, not the only child he had left after her mother's death. He wore grief the way he wore his suits, tailored and spotless, with no visible seams. That afternoon, Emma sat in the study again, the heavy clock ticking behind her. Her latest exam, another string of red excess, lay spread across the desk. The ink bled through the paper, sharp against the pale wood. She tried, truly tried, but nothing she did ever felt enough. She stared at the marks until her vision blurred. Her throat tightened. Her pulse thudded in her ears. No one was home. Her father had left for a board meeting, so she let herself fall apart quietly. A choked sob escaped before she could stop it. From somewhere behind her came a soft sound, the swish of fabric, the rhythm of a broom. Emma froze, ashamed of her tears. Then a voice, low and steady, broke the room's stillness. "You're not stupid," the woman said. "You're scared." Emma spun in her chair. Standing near the bookshelf was Olivia Daniel, the cleaning lady her father barely acknowledged. She held a dust cloth in one hand and an unreadable calm in her eyes. "What did you say?" Emma whispered. Olivia met her gaze. "You're scared of never being enough for a man who's already decided you're not." For a moment, Emma forgot to breathe. No one spoke to her that way. No one dared. The words hit like a key turning in a locked door. Quiet, precise, irreversible. Olivia didn't linger. She simply turned back to her work, wiping the shelf as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just pulled the ground from under Emma's perfect, polished world. Emma stared after her, her heartbeat loud against the hush of the mansion. For the first time, she wondered if her failures weren't signs of weakness, but symptoms of something deeper, the kind of truth no tutor had ever mentioned. She looked again at the red marks across her exam, then at the woman dusting the books her father never read. Something inside her shifted, fragile but certain. Maybe the real lesson wasn't in the test she kept failing. Maybe it was standing right there in front of her, holding a broom. For the rest of the afternoon, Emma found herself listening, not to the ticking of the clock or the echo of her own frustration, but to the faint, rhythmic hum drifting from Olivia Daniel as she moved from room to room. It wasn't random. It had cadence, almost musical. When Emma listened closer, she realized Olivia was humming words, lines of poetry. The next morning, Olivia was already in the library when Emma came down for breakfast. She was arranging the books her father collected for show, leather-bound volumes untouched by anyone except the staff who dusted them. Emma lingered in the doorway, unnoticed, as Olivia gently straightened a spine, paused, and then moved the book to a different shelf. "You know that one's out of order," Olivia murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Eliot doesn't belong beside Dickens. He and Yeats with a better conversation." Emma blinked. "You read those?" she asked before she could stop herself. Olivia turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "Once upon a time, before these shelves became decoration." That answer lingered with Emma all day. She began to watch Olivia, not with judgment, but with curiosity. The woman moved like part of the house itself, slipping through corridors in soft shoes, her presence barely more than a shadow. But every so often, that shadow left traces of brilliance. A dust cloth folded into the shape of a swan. A quote from a poem whispered under her breath. A correction made to a misfiled volume in the encyclopedia set. Emma noticed everything now. It was during one of those quiet afternoons that the silence broke again. "You're still thinking about what I said, aren't you?" Olivia's voice came from behind her, gentle but certain. Emma turned from her desk. "You shouldn't talk like that. To me, I mean. My father doesn't have to know," Olivia said, a hint of amusement in her tone. "And I've lived long enough not to be afraid of men who confuse money with meaning." Something in Emma softened. "I'm not stupid," she said quickly, the words spilling out. "I just can't seem to be what he wants. Every time I try, it's like I disappear a little more." Olivia leaned her broom against the wall and sat on the edge of the nearest chair, her movements careful, deliberate. "Perfection isn't the goal, child," she said. "Honesty is. You keep chasing his version of success, and you'll never find your own." Emma's throat tightened. She'd heard advice from psychologists, tutors, mentors, but none had sounded like this. None had felt like this. "How did you know that?" she asked quietly. Olivia hesitated. For a second, the mask of calm slipped, revealing something older and sadder beneath. "Because I once tried to be perfect too," she said. "And it cost me everything." The words carried weight, too heavy to question. Emma studied her in the fading afternoon light. For the first time, she didn't see a servant. She saw a mystery, someone who carried knowledge the world had refused to see. "Olivia," Emma said softly, "will you teach me?" The older woman's eyes widened, then warmed. "Teach you what, Miss Darwin?" Emma smiled faintly, her voice trembling but sure. "How to stop pretending I already know." And somewhere between them, in the quiet of that grand, lonely house, the first lesson began. The first lesson didn't happen in the grand library or at the polished mahogany desk where Emma's tutors had sat. It began in the kitchen, after midnight, among the hum of the refrigerator and the soft flicker of the stove light. Olivia was finishing her shift when Emma slipped in, still in her robe, clutching a half-written essay. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and tea. "I didn't think you'd come," Olivia said, rinsing her hands. "I didn't think you'd say yes," Emma answered. The older woman smiled, setting down the dish towel. "Then it seems we both underestimated ourselves." They sat at the small wooden table, the same one the staff used for quick meals. Emma spread her papers out, pages covered in crossed-out words, rewritten sentences, and corrections from her last tutor. "Every teacher says my writing sounds fake," she muttered. "But I'm just doing what they tell me." Olivia scanned the page quietly, her finger tracing the lines. "That's the problem. You're writing what you think they want to hear. Try this instead. Say it how you'd say it to me." Emma frowned. "But that's not how essays work." "That's exactly how thinking works," Olivia said softly. "Honesty before perfection. That's the secret." For a moment, Emma didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She'd spent years chasing perfect answers, and here was someone telling her to start with truth instead. Olivia reached for a clipping from her apron pocket, an old newspaper folded neatly in half. "Read this," she said. It was an article about a politician who'd promised reform but delivered nothing. "Now tell me what you feel about it, not what you think sounds clever." Emma hesitated. "It's hypocritical," she said slowly. "He talks about fairness but doesn't live it." "Good," Olivia nodded. "Now write that." They worked for an hour, maybe two. The kitchen clock ticked softly as sentences began to take shape. Honest, unpolished, alive. For the first time, Emma didn't feel stupid. She felt awake. When they finished, Olivia read the essay aloud. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. "You've got a voice," Olivia said. "Don't let anyone teach you out of it." That night became the first of many. Every few evenings, once the house went quiet, Emma would sneak downstairs. Sometimes Olivia brought old essays from her teaching days, sometimes newspaper articles or a worn poetry book that had survived every move she'd made. Through stories, they explored history, empathy, the way words could reveal truth. The lessons weren't about passing tests anymore. They were about learning to think. Weeks later, Emma's next exam came. She didn't over-prepare. She just wrote as she'd learned, with honesty. When the results arrived, her name wasn't at the bottom. For the first time, it was in the middle. A quiet victory, but to her, it felt like sunlight breaking through marble walls. Olivia's eyes shone when she saw the paper. "You did this, not me," she said. But Emma noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, the way old pride flickered back to life. The next evening, as they began another lesson, neither of them noticed the sound of footsteps echoing faintly down the hall. Richardson Darwin's footsteps, pausing just outside the kitchen door. He smiled faintly when he saw the essay on the counter. "Ah," he murmured. "Looks like the new tutor is finally earning her pay." And then he walked away, never realizing the truth was sitting right there, wearing a cleaning apron and a quiet smile. Emma Darwin was changing, and everyone saw it. Her teachers noticed it first. She began answering questions with quiet confidence, not the rehearsed politeness they were used to. Her essays, once hollow and overpolished, now felt alive, sharp, human, sincere. Even her posture changed. There was a light in her that hadn't been there before, a steadiness that made people curious. By the end of the week, her closest friends, Sophie and Clara, cornered her by the lockers. "What happened to you?" Sophie asked. "You used to hate class." Emma hesitated, glancing down the hall as if guarding a secret. "Maybe I just found someone who finally knows how to teach." Later that evening, Emma invited them to her house to study. When they arrived, they found not a hired tutor or a stack of textbooks waiting, but Olivia Daniel, wiping down the kitchen counters as though she didn't belong in the center of anything. Olivia looked up, startled to see guests. "Miss Emma, this isn't." "It's okay," Emma said quickly. "They just want to learn." Olivia studied the two girls' expectant faces. Then she sighed, half in protest, half in acceptance. "All right, but you'll clean your own teacups." That was how the secret classroom was born. They gathered at the wooden kitchen table after dark. 3 privileged girls and a cleaning lady who spoke like a philosopher. There were no worksheets, no grades. Just questions. What makes something true? Olivia would ask, passing around the evening paper. Why do people hide their mistakes? Is being kind the same as being good? At first, the girls fumbled for answers. Then, slowly, their thoughts deepened. Their laughter came easier. Their arguments grew sharper, but kinder too. One night, Clara asked Olivia why she wasn't teacher. The room went still. Olivia's gaze softened, but her voice carried weight. "I was," she said simply, "until telling the truth cost me my place." They didn't press further, but the air around them changed. Respect settled like a hush. In those nights, Olivia's old spirit began to return. Her hands still smelled of soap and polish, but her eyes gleamed with the fire of a mind alive again. She didn't just clean their home anymore. She cleaned their thinking, dusted off their certainty, swept open the corners where curiosity had been hiding. The kitchen became something sacred, a place of discovery and freedom, lit by the soft glow of learning that felt real. But upstairs, in his office, Richardson Darwin had begun to notice the lights burning later than usual. The muffled laughter, the whispers. He thought his daughter was finally taking her study seriously. He was right, just not in the way he imagined. Emma Darwin had never known quiet like this, quiet that hummed with questions, the kind that pulled at her until she couldn't ignore it. For weeks, Olivia had become a mystery wrapped in humility, her past hidden beneath the scent of polish and lemon soap. That night, curiosity won. Emma crept down the servants' hallway, heart hammering in her throat. The air was cold, the marble biting at her bare feet. At the end stood a plain white door, slightly ajar. She pushed it open. The room was small, barely large enough for a bed and a chair. On the desk sat a single framed photograph. Olivia, younger, standing proudly in front of a chalkboard, her hands smudged with chalk, her eyes alive with light. Emma lifted it gently, studying the face she thought she knew. Beneath the frame lay old papers, lesson plans, essays, faded letters. One bore a red stamp, dismissed. Her throat tightened. She gathered the courage to ask the next day. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emma asked, laying the photograph on the kitchen table. Olivia froze. For a moment, she looked not like a cleaner, but like someone remembering a life she'd buried. "I was a teacher once," she said softly. "A literature teacher. I loved words, stories, the way they could save a person." Her voice trembled. "Until one day, they used words against me." Emma listened as Olivia told the story. How she defended a student accused of plagiarism. How the headmaster twisted her kindness into something shameful. How the scandal spread like wildfire. Her husband left. Her students were forbidden to contact her. And one morning, her classroom key no longer fit the door. "I lost everything," Olivia whispered. "My job, my name, my place in the world." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "But I never stopped teaching. Not really. I taught myself to keep believing in truth, even when it didn't believe in me." Emma's heart ached. She saw not a maid, but a scholar exiled from her own world. "You shouldn't be cleaning floors," she said fiercely. "You should be teaching again." Olivia shook her head gently. "Teaching isn't about where you stand, Emma. It's about who's willing to listen." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The photograph lay on her desk beside her notes. Olivia's chalk-dusted smile, a silent promise. She picked up her pen and wrote in her journal. The world forgot her name. "I won't." Outside her window, the lights in her father's office flickered out. But in Emma's room, the light burned on, bright and defiant. While upstairs, Richardson Darwin mistook its glow for diligence. He was right, just not in the way he imagined. But in Emma's room, the light burned on, bright and defiant. While upstairs, Richardson Darwin mistook its glow for diligence. He was right, just not in the way he imagined. The call came the next morning. The headmistress's voice, brittle and precise, sliced through Richardson's calm. "Mr. Darwin," she began, "I thought it best you hear this from me. It's come to our attention that your cleaning lady has been tutoring Emma." Richardson's pen froze mid-signature. "Tutoring?" His tone curdled. "She's been seen bringing books, philosophy, literature far beyond the curriculum. The staff is concerned this arrangement might confuse the girl." By the time he hung up, his jaw ached from how tightly he'd clenched it. He found Olivia in the library, dusting the shelves that gleamed like judgment. "Is it true?" he demanded. "You've been teaching my daughter?" Olivia turned, startled but calm. She asked questions. "I answered. That's all. You are paid to clean, not to corrupt my daughter." His voice cracked the silence, sharp and unforgiving. Emma rushed in, eyes wide. "Father, please." She wasn't corrupting me. She was helping me. But Richardson's pride had already decided. He saw not compassion but trespass, not growth but rebellion. "You will pack your things immediately," he said to Olivia. "And you, Emma, will never speak of her again. Do you understand?" Olivia didn't argue. She removed her apron, folded it neatly, and set it on the nearest chair. Her hands trembled only once. Then she turned to Emma and smiled. Soft, knowing, unbroken. "Keep learning," she said quietly. "No matter who tries to stop you." Emma clung to her, but Olivia gently freed herself, leaving the faint scent of lemon polish and hope in the air. Then she was gone. For days afterward, Emma's room stayed dark. Her textbooks gathered dust. The questions that once fluttered inside her mind now sank like stones. Richardson watched his daughter's grades slip again, mistaking her silence for obedience, her grief for focus. The house itself seemed to mourn, its walls echoing less, its light dimming earlier each night. Sometimes, Emma thought she heard Olivia humming in the hallways or saw a figure bending over her desk in the reflection of the window. But when she turned, there was only her father's portrait, watching, certain he had restored order. What he didn't see, what no one did, was the single notebook hidden beneath Emma's mattress. Its pages, filled with Olivia's lessons, still whispered their quiet defiance. And though the house had grown colder, deep inside Emma, something small and fierce refused to freeze. Winter pressed against the house like a hell breath. The air inside felt heavy, stripped of laughter, stripped of warmth. Emma kept mostly to her room, a ghost behind her own door. Her father took her silence as proof that balance had been restored. The rebellion, he thought, had been corrected. He was proud of the quiet. He didn't notice it was the quiet of surrender. Days slipped by in pale repetition: school, dinner, sleep. Emma's grades crawled back to passable, but her eyes no longer followed the words on the page. She read because she was told to, not because she cared. The fire that had once burned in her, fueled by curiosity and questions, was nothing but ash. Then one morning, an announcement buzzed over the school intercom: a national scholarship essay contest. For young voices with something to say, the headmistress declared, as if irony were a language she didn't speak. Her classmates whispered and planned their entries. Emma didn't. Where a teacher handed her the form, she folded it into a neat square and slipped it into her bag, unopened. The thought of writing felt hollow. Words had betrayed her once. They'd cost her Olivia. A week later, while cleaning her room, an old habit she couldn't shake, Emma found the corner of a small notebook wedged behind her desk. The cover was worn, the pages edged with dust. Her breath caught. It was Olivia's. She sat on the floor, notebook trembling in her hands. Inside, the familiar handwriting curved across the yellowed pages. Snippets of lessons, quotes, questions Olivia had scribbled to spark thought. Near the back, one line was underlined twice. If they silence your voice, write louder. Emma stared at the words until her vision blurred. Something deep inside her, something that had been silent for too long, stirred again. That night, she pulled out a blank sheet of paper and wrote a title before she could think twice. The Price of Perfect. The words came slowly at first, then all at once. She wrote about the weight of expectations, about how perfection could be a cage disguised as praise. She wrote about Olivia, though she never used her name, about the teacher who wasn't supposed to teach and the lessons that couldn't be erased. Each sentence felt like a small rebellion, each paragraph a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. When the essay was done, she read it aloud to the empty room. Her voice was unsteady, but it didn't falter. The next morning, Emma printed the essay, signed her full name at the bottom, and slipped it into the submission box at school. Her hands shook as she walked away, but for the first time in months, her chest felt light. Somewhere, she imagined Olivia smiling, proud, quiet, and free. The morning of awards day arrived wrapped in rain. The sky hung low, heavy with the same gray that had lived inside Emma for months. She lingered by the window, watching drops race down the glass. Her father called up the stairs once, twice, then gave up. He assumed she had no reason to go, and, truthfully, Emma agreed. What did she expect? That her quiet act of defiance, an essay slipped into a box, had meant anything? The world didn't listen to girls like her, not when they stepped outside the lines drawn for them. Still, as the rain softened, something pulled her to the door. Maybe curiosity, maybe the echo of Olivia's voice. She walked to school without an umbrella, her uniform damp, her shoes squeaking with each step. The auditorium was already packed. Rows of students fidgeted, parents whispering, teachers smiling the tight smiles of ceremony. Emma slipped into a back seat, unnoticed. The headmistress took the stage, her pearls gleaming under the lights. And now, she said, the winner of this year's National Essay Scholarship, an exceptional piece titled The Price of Perfect. Emma froze. The headmistress adjusted her glasses and began to read aloud. At first, Emma didn't hear the words. They sounded distant, strange, until the cadence caught and she recognized herself in every line. Perfection is a mirror that shows only what others want to see. We polish it until our reflection disappears. I have lived in a house built on the fear of mistakes, where questions are dusted away like dirt on the floor. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emma's pulse raced. She looked up, and there, at the back of the room, stood her father. Rigid, pale, listening. The principal continued. I learned that imperfection isn't failure. It's honesty. It's the courage to be unfinished, to keep learning even when the world tells you to stop. Emma's throat tightened. The hall was silent except for the steady rise of her own heartbeat. And then she saw her. Olivia, standing quietly near the side door, her old uniform pressed, her hands clasped in front of her. Not hiding, not apologizing, just watching. When the headmistress finished, applause hesitated on the edge of the room. The silence felt alive, waiting. Then the words came. "Would the author of The Price of Perfect please come forward?" Emma stood. Her knees trembled, but she walked the aisle, every step a choice. On the stage, she faced the sea of faces. Her father's eyes met hers, full of disbelief, maybe even shame, but beneath it, something softer flickered. She took the microphone. "I failed every test," she began, her voice steady now, "until someone the world ignored taught me one secret." She glanced toward Olivia. Learning isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to begin. For a moment, no one moved. Then a single clap broke the stillness. Another followed. And then the room rose, students, parents, even teachers, until the hall thundered with applause. Emma felt the sound move through her, fierce and freeing. Olivia smiled once, small and certain, before slipping quietly from the room. And as the lights blazed down on her, Emma realized, this time, the brightness was hers. The next morning, the video of Emma's speech had already begun to spread. Students shared it. Teachers reposted it. Headlines called it "The Girl Who Thanked the Cleaning Lady." And with every view, Olivia's story came back to life. Richardson Darwin watched it alone in his office. The applause echoed faintly through his speakers, but louder still was the memory of his daughter's words. Learning begins the moment you stop pretending you already know. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt small and, somehow, lighter for it. 2 days later, he found himself standing outside Olivia Daniels' modest flat, clutching a bouquet of white lilies. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face, then softened into something like peace. "I came to apologize," he said quietly. "I thought I was protecting Emma, but I was protecting my pride." Olivia studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in, Mr. Darwin. Or perhaps it's time I called you Richardson." That conversation stretched long into the afternoon, about teaching, about mistakes, about what it meant to start over. By sunset, they had decided on one thing: to build something lasting from all that had been lost. Within a year, the Daniel Darwin Foundation for Real Learning opened its doors. Its mission was simple: to teach the children everyone else had given up on, and the teachers who had forgotten why they began. Emma became its beating heart. Olivia its steady guide. Richardson funded the first campus quietly, not for credit, but for redemption. They filled empty classrooms with color and curiosity. Students painted questions across the walls. Why? What if? How do we know? And under Olivia's watchful eye, they learned not to fear the wrong answer, but to chase the right question. One afternoon, Emma walked past an open door and paused. Olivia stood at the front of a classroom, chalk in hand, her eyes bright with the same fire Emma remembered from their first lesson. "This," Olivia said to her students, "is where learning truly begins." Emma smiled and joined her at the board. Together, they taught side by side, teacher and student, mentor and friend, two lives intertwined by one secret that had become something larger than both. On the wall behind them hung a single framed quote in Emma's careful handwriting. "The secret isn't in the answer. It's in daring to ask the question." As the afternoon sun spilled across the room, Emma looked out at the faces before her, curious, unafraid, alive. And in her heart, she knew the truth Olivia had always carried. Some secrets aren't meant to be hidden, they're meant to be passed on. Thank you for staying to the very end. If you find this story interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment your thoughts. Let's make the video to go viral so that it will reach more people.